Okay, so welcome everybody. My pleasure to have you here in this room. And I'm going to speak about Groovy, the Groovy dynamic language, and Grails, the web application framework, and how they work on Google App Engine. I'm Guillaume Laforge, so excuse me, perhaps I've got a little French accent, but I'm coming from France, Paris. I'm leading the Groovy project. I've been working on that project for already quite a number of years. I am also leading the specification GSR 241 for standardizing the Groovy language inside the Java community process. I work for Spring Source, so my Groovy title is Head of Groovy Development. I initiated the creation of the Grails framework back in 2005. And I also co-authored this book, Groovy in Action. So if you want to make me rich, buy the book. And on each copy, I will get like 50 cents or something like that because I just wrote like a couple of chapters. But you know, you have to start small. And well, if I sell 1 billion or 1 million at least, maybe I'll get rich enough. And I'm usually speaking at various conferences around the world. So, first of all, let's start with a small question. Who's familiar with Groovy? Who's already used Groovy? Okay, so that's a fair number of you. So the agenda, I'm going to do a very quick overview of what Groovy is, its main features, and I'll introduce you to things like Groovlets, our version of Groovy servlets, Groovy templates, and a little hidden gem I'll be mentioning as well, but I didn't put it in the agenda. Then I will have a look at at the Grails web application framework, and how you can use Grails to deploy applications on Google App Engine. And just to tell you a bit about of the story behind the support of Groovy on App Engine, Java. So first of all, I think it's a bit misleading to say Google App Engine Java, because it's not just Java the language, actually. It's really Java virtual machine, basically. It's more App Engine on the Java virtual machine, because you can run other languages. It's not just about Java. And back a few months ago, thanks to my good friend Dick Wall, we got in touch with the Java team, the Google App Engine Java team, and we worked together so that we could ensure that Groovy would be a first-class citizen language for Google App Engine. Let me thank especially Toby from the App Engine Java team, who really helped us greatly ensuring that Groovy would run well on that environment. Okay, so let's start more concretely. So a few words about Groovy. So Groovy is a dynamic language for the Java virtual machine. Dynamic language in the sense that it's not a statically typed language. So it supports typing information. So you can say string name. So it's not just loosely typed. In that sense, it's not dynamic because of typing, but dynamic because of the way it behaves. And there's what we call a meta-object protocol, which is the runtime behavior of your types and classes. And you can change the behavior at runtime of, let's say you've got a class, string class, and you can change the behavior of strings because you have access to that runtime meta-object protocol. And it's a language which compiles down directly to bytecode. So you can put everything, all those .class files in a jar and put that in your class path, and it becomes kind of an implementation detail if you're using Groovy or Java. So also the nice aspect of Groovy is that it's been designed to be totally seamlessly interoperable with Java. So you could For instance, let's say you have a Java interface, you extend that, you implement that interface in Groovy and extend that class in Java, and vice versa. You exchange Groovy and Java in that sentence, and basically it will just work, which is not always the case with other alternative languages, unfortunately. Groovy is also, forgot to mention that, an open source project hosted at Codehouse. And one of the design goals when we worked on Groovy in the first place was that we wanted Groovy to be a language for Java developers mainly, although it's not just for Java developers, obviously. But the idea is that we wanted to have Groovy be as close as possible to Java. So we even took Java, the Java 5 grammar, and kind of evolved it to make it a little bit more groovy, sorry for the pun, because we were a bit frustrated with Java, and there were many features we liked in other languages, and we wanted to bring those features to Java. So Groovy is a kind of our own version of Java. And also the fact it derives from Java 5, we also support features like annotations, generics, static imports, var args, and so on. So it's pretty handy, and it's one of those rare languages, alternative languages, which allow you to interact with, let's say, JDO, JPA, JB3, all those stuff with annotations, for instance. So it's a nice choice if you want to use those things, and if you want to use an alternative language. And we borrowed several ideas from other languages. And it's a language which is pretty easy to learn for Java developers. So now a little overview of existing features. So it's fully object-oriented. Even when you say 3, the number 3, it's really an object, so you can do 3 to a string or whatever. When I mentioned seamless Java integration, for instance, we've got a joint compiler, which allows you to compile everything in one go. So when you've got circular references between Groovy and Java, it's totally transparent. We added closures, those loosely defined definition of closures. Basically some reusable, assignable code blocks. We've got properties, so you don't need to write those getters and setters every time. We have optional typing, so you decide whether you want to say def name or string name. That's up to you. We've got some various shortcut notations, for instance, for accessing getters and so on. And we provide handy wrappers around existing APIs, for instance, Groovlets and template engines that we'll come to in a few slides. And the syntax, although it derives from Java, we evolved it, so it's pretty malleable, and you can write, and also because of the meta-programming facilities, you can write domain-specific languages with Groovy. Groovy is quite a good candidate for writing embedded domain-specific languages. Okay, perhaps before showing anything else, when I say, so where's my my console there? So I'm going to increase the font size. Can everybody read that at the back of the room? Right? Yeah? Okay. So let's take a small, stupid Hello World Java program. So here I'm using one of the tools which comes with when you download Groovy. From groovy.codehouse.org. We've got a swing console, we've got a shell as well. There's a Groovy C compiler, a Groovy interpreter, so there are many tools which comes with Groovy. And to make you a bit more familiar, for those who don't know Groovy very much yet, basically this is a valid Java program, but I can actually run it. It's also a valid Groovy program. But as you learn more and more about Groovy, you can make that little Groovy, Java program more idiomatic Groovy. So, for instance, you can remove things like those boring and ugly semicolons. Okay. And if I execute that, it's still going to print hello Groovy. What could I do? Yeah, by default, we chose to make classes and methods public, so you don't need to repeat and specify public all the time. You can say public string greet, and it's still going to print hello Groovy when I run it. Yeah, so I mentioned the fact that we support properties. So if you just say, instead of specifying a visibility modifier, if you just say string name, you can even completely remove the getter and the setter, and the Groovy C compiler is going to generate a getter and a setter for you. So if I run that again, it's going to print hello world. We support, well, it's probably the sexiest feature of the language, which support what we call G strings. So this is interpolated strings, basically. So instead of doing the usual string plus variable plus string, etc., you can just say return hello name, and it's going to refer the dollar name will be replaced with the value of the name property when the string is going to be evaluated. We can also, for instance, for the latest statement of your method returning something, you can even omit the return keyword. So you can say just hello Groovy. I'm just going to say hello Groovy. What else? Yeah, back on properties. We also allow you to use that shortcut notation. So you can say .name equals Groovy, and it prints hello Groovy. And we can use named arguments in the constructor. Although there's no constructor looking like that, you can say Groovy. And what it's going to do, it's going to create, instantiate hello world with the default constructor, and then call the setter, set name, afterwards. So it's a nice way of initializing instances. We've got some other shortcuts like println. You can also omit parentheses. So I mentioned you can choose to not type your variables or your method parameters and such. You can say hello world. And because Groovy is also a scripting language, you can even remove that main method, and you can put some statements outside of the class body, and it's actually becoming a script. And, well, now you've got something which looks a bit more idiomatic Groovy. So progressively, as you learn more of Groovy, you get some shorter samples, some classes which are way shorter. And if you want to have, if you want to play also with Groovy without installing it on your computer, there's a Groovy web console, which is actually a Google App Engine, application. So you can say, hello, Google I/O or something like that, and you can execute that in the cloud. So if I execute, okay, it's going to print hello Google I/O. You can see the result, the output, stack traces if you've got stack traces. Okay, so back to the slides. So since Groovy is a language which is supported on Google App Engine, you can write normal servlets, but with all the tricks we've learned, you can do things like remove the public keyword. You can remove the semicolons. Since on the response you've got a set content type method, you can use that shortcut notation, resp.getContentType equals something. And same for getWriter. You can just say resp writer println hello world, and it's going to print something. So if I have a look at the, if I have a look at, I put that there. No, it's not the window I wanted to see. Where is it? Okay, open dots. Yeah, that's it. So if you look at basically what it looks like, well, this was my hello world program. So I've got a small, well, more or less empty project with some sources. I wrote, I'm going to open that into TextMate, for instance. I even wrote a small Groovy script to call end tasks for doing things like compilation and such. And here's my hello servlet, the one you saw in the slides. So it's pretty much the same, unless I made, I did a little additional thing there where you can see I print that string, and inside it's actually a G string, and I can use a shell object from Groovy to evaluate some expression. So I can just show you how it returns some results. And then I've got my App Engine file. I've got my Groovy jar. And in my web.xml, I've defined my servlet there, defined also servlet mapping. And to run that, I think I can increase the font size as well. Okay, is it readable? Okay, cool. Okay, so we're there, and I'm going to that directory. And if I run that locally with the local App Engine, and I go back there, up, and so it's, I think the mapping, it's hello. No, or, yeah, it's hello. So you see, well, it's really a dumb servlet, and the Groovy shell evaluated the expression, and that's great. So nothing really complicated. But if you look back at this example, just there, basically, in Java, you always have that kind of boilerplate technical code where you have to define a class, you have to define methods, and so on. And although what you really just wanted to show was, you wanted to print hello Google App Engine and to print some value there. So what if we were able to just do that, println hello Google App Engine, and println some value there? And actually, that's what Groovlets, the slides are there. That's what Groovlets are for. And basically, Groovlets lets you just write what matters the most. Basically, just println something. And we also got some interesting feature, which is called the markup builder. With Groovy, we support the builder pattern somehow at the syntax level, and that's that concept that we're going to use. So for instance, if I go back to my console, which is just there, if I import Groovy XML markup builder, and I do def mkp equals new markup builder, and then I can do mkp.html, and let's say body, and inside that body, I'm going to put some paragraph, hello, and it's going to create some HTML. And basically, what you see here is just a method call which takes a closure as parameter, and inside that closure, you see another method call, which is delegated to the markup builder, which takes another closure, and inside that closure, so you see the nesting of the nodes HTML, body, P, at the syntax level, and and with nice curly braces around, and you say P hello, and it's going to print P hello. So if you use something like that in a script, you could output some HTML pretty easily. And that's what we are doing. So with this second example there, I'm going to use TextMate again. So instead of the servlet class that you saw earlier, So I'm going to do basically the same. So it's just a script, and I can use this nice markup builder. I'm going to put that a bit bigger. Okay, so you can use such a structure in your script, and you can then run that. Okay, you can close this one. You can then run that. Where is it? So it's to Groovlets, dev app server var, and guess what? It's going to show you. So what's the name of that? Where is it? I'm lost. Yeah, so it's called hello, so I have to say hello.groovy. And all the all the Groovy files are actually situated in webinf, and you can put them under Groovy or elsewhere. And the servlet there, so I defined a Groovy servlet and a mapping to coach all the star.groovy URLs and redirect that to this little Groovlet. So you don't have all the usual boilerplate code of defining a class, some methods, and so on, but you can use that. Okay, back to the slides. So we can use the markup builder, and basically you just need to reference the Groovy servlet and define the URL mapping. And we also have another feature in Groovy, which is we've got built-in template engines, basically. So if you've got a string which looks like that, and where you can use, like in G-strings, this $month notation, or you can use, like in JSPs, this less than and percent symbol, or you can also use this to insert some value. So this is just a block of code that's going to be interleaved in the string, so you can print to that string, or you can directly insert some value, and then you can also pass some binding, some variables inside that template. So you create your template engine, you create the template, the text, and you replace actually all those variables on placeholders and such with the variables from the binding, and then it's going to create a template, and then you can output that. So we created the Groovlets concept, and thanks to the Groovy templates, we also created a special template which takes templates as input. So instead of using the markup builder, you can define some HTML and use things like $message and so on. And you can have, so if I show you that in my small example, again, so I stop this one, I go in templates, and I'm going to open that in TextMate again, and that's basically the same thing. So I defined as in my slide, the template servlet, and I kept also the Groovy servlet from earlier. Here you can still use the Groovlets, but I defined this extension. So if you look at that, I added this star.gtpl, so all these files are going to be, all these URLs are going to be sent to the template servlet. And you can look at my index GTPL, and for instance, just like, well, more or less like in JSPs and such, you can say $new date, and it's going to replace that placeholder with the date. Or you can use things like, so in Groovy we added some methods to things like numbers, and we added a times method on numbers so that you can say 3.times, and 3 times we are going to execute the body of that closure, and it means that we'll be printing hello world in the output 3 times. And something which is interesting also is that there are some shortcut methods for doing things like includes, redirect, forward, what else? I think that's all. So you can also do some page composition, basically, and in my older template there, I've got a little div, and I can say tomorrow equals new date plus 1. And in Groovy, you can also do operator overloading. So if you do new date plus 1, it's going to add 1 day to the new date. And if I run that, so I'm changing again. No, I'm already at the right place. So. Yes, dev app server var. Okay, and if I go back there, and so what was the index? GTPL. And okay, it's going to say today is this date. 3 times I'm going to print hello world, and tomorrow is Friday the 29th. And even with the time zone difference, because for me it's still somehow midnight, it just works. Okay. So, what else? I think I've shown everything for the templates. So also what's interesting is that usually Groovlets are probably what you'd use for your controllers and templates for your views. So the best approach, although I'm mixing a bit everything there, but the best approach usually is to have your controllers as Groovlets, and then somewhere there you can say forward, you can say something like forward to my view, okay? You can do things like that. And you can also put things in the request so that you can pass some values back to the view. Okay, that's the basic idea. Okay, don't save, no. So this was the servlet template, and there's something pretty new and which is not yet available on the web, but I'll put that soon online. It's so on top. So all these things are provided by Groovy out of the box. So you can use a Groovy servlet, you can use Groovy templates, and so on. So you just need basically the Groovy jar into your webinf lib. But we thought that we could add some additional sugar on top of the Groovy servlets and the Groovy templates. And Gaelic, so there's a little pun. I tried to find a name with the Google App Engine letters, the acronym. Wow. So basically, it's just a very thin layer on top of the Groovlets and the servlet templates, plus some wrapper around the Google App Engine Java SDK APIs. And for instance, all those nice services which are provided by Google App Engine, like the image manipulation, like the user service, like what else? The URL fetcher. All these handy services are injected in Groovlets and Groovy templates. And we also started to add some new additional methods to simplify the use of the SDK, of the APIs of Google App Engine Java. So another very small demo of that, which is, okay, just so I stop this server and I go to Gaelic. And I'm going to open that in TextMate again. So I created, so I've got a little template there where actually, so all the services are injected directly. So you don't have to reference them or pass them in any way, but basically just do data store service or memcache service, and you can access those services. So here I'm just going to print the toString of these services. And I'll show you the category sample afterwards. No, I'm going to show you just that right now. So what we wanted to do is, so if you look at the low-level data store API, When you use, I can even show you like the API, the Javadoc directly. So if you look at the data store, oh, interesting Firefox bug, perhaps. If you look at the, where it is there, the entity, it keeps on doing that. It's not very nice. So if you look at the entity, the low-level API and the entity class in particular, you've got methods like get property or set property. But for instance, if your entity represents a concept like a person, you'd like to be able to say person.name or person.age. But if you use the low-level API, you'll have to say, so new entity, you define the kind, like new entity person, and then my entity dot set property name, comma, some value. But with Groovy, the fact that it's a dynamic language, we can use a shortened notation, and we somehow decorated some of the classes of the Java SDK so as to add some syntax sugar on top of that. So instead of the not very friendly Java version, you can do something like that. For instance, you define a new entity the same way, but you can say use either the subscript notation, so the with those square brackets, so you can say entity name equals something, or you can also use this other syntax, which is the normal getter shortcut notation, and you can access it. And so I'm using again the markup builder for printing something. And what other methods we added? For instance, still on entity, we added a delete method because it's on the data store service. It's got a delete method, but the delete method is not on the entity. So we added a delete method, a save method, and some of the other nice little things we did. You can say we created a with transaction method which takes a closure as parameter, and inside that closure, all the operations are going to be done in that transaction. So there are get property, or it's on the data store service, where you've got methods like get. To get an entity from the data store, you usually get by its key, or you can pass a transaction, get transaction, and the keys, or the key or the keys. And so we wanted to simplify a bit those those operations to make things a bit nicer, a bit groovier. And another example of the little things we did. So if you look at the mail service API, you have to create a new mail service.message class called the getters and setters, actually the setters. So you say mail message dot set to dot set sender, etc. And we wanted to use named arguments, which are supported in Groovy, so that you could use that syntax to easily write an email to someone using the mail service API. So I can run this little example, nothing earth-shattering. Okay, no, I'm already in the right place. A dev, app server, var, and okay, if I go back there, so I think it's still index GTPL if I'm not wrong. And basically, you can see that we printed the two strings of all the injected services. Oh, yes, there's also a user variable which is injected. So if there's a user currently logged in, you're going to see that user there. And then the various operations I showed you, like creating a new entity, starting a transaction, and so on, and sending an email. Okay. So now that we talked about, so I'm going to stop the server before I forget. And I'm going to speak now about Grails. Okay. So Gaelic is going to be available on gaelic.appsport.com. I haven't put the URL because I have not deployed anything there, but it's really something completely new, so it's still pretty, there's not much yet available apart from what I've shown you, but it's going to be there sometime soon. Thank you. So now, so we worked with the Google App Engine Java team to make Groovy a first-class citizen in terms of language supported on App Engine Java. But we also worked pretty recently on the support of Grails, the web application framework, which is actually a small, simple equation. Grails is Groovy for writing everything like controllers, domain classes, etc. It's also Spring, which everything is based on top of Spring, and if you use it, outside of App Engine, usually you use Hibernate for the persistence. So it's a mix of these things, and not just that, it's also a mix of it's built on top of really rock solid and proven open source bricks. So Spring and Spring MVC, Spring Webflow. You can do page composition with site mesh. You can have Quartz jobs, and it comes bundled with the JT servlet container and an in-memory relational database, HSQLDB. And we put a small ORM layer on top of Hibernate to simplify things in a nice way, and it provides its own command line tool, so you can say Grails run app, Grails create domain class, etc. So this is our command line interface, and it's actually, you can call also some build commands such as Grails var, so it creates your var, and you can put that var on any servlet container very easily. And we took some great inspiration from other frameworks like Ruby on Rails, for instance. So we followed certain paradigms, certain principles like convention over configuration. So instead of, well, when you're writing a Java application, you usually have to choose all the bricks you want to mix together, define, configure together, etc. So you usually waste a bit of time with that. Grails comes bundled with those bricks pre-configured. And usually you have more time to focus on what matters, the business concepts and so on, rather than on boring configuration. And we also provide features like scaffolding to help you get started and have some simple CRUD UIs on top of your domain classes. There's a nice extensible plugin system, so you can extend and expand Grails to provide different view layers, different integrations with other external APIs, or for instance, using security APIs or using JMS, etc. So you can use plugins for that kind of stuff. And you can have pretty modular pages because you can use site mesh for page composition. You can use taglibs for if you've got some UI widgets that you want to reuse across your application, you can create taglibs very easily, way more easily than with JSP taglibs. We've got templates and so on. And this is the overall big picture. So Grails on top of all these nice open source bricks, and Groovy on the side for writing domain classes and so on. And if you look at when you create a new project, actually, I think I'm going to show you that right after. Well, the fact it follows certain conventions, and the project structure, the project layout is also part of the conventions. So we follow the MVC principle. So you've got controllers. Your domain classes are your model. You can put the views in the views directory, and so on. You can put libraries, additional libraries. You can put scripts for the build system, additional sources, your test classes, etc. And all your JavaScript or images, CSS. you can put them in the web app directory. So that's the global project structure. And since Grails provides a plugin system so as to make Grails extensible, there are tons of existing plugins, well over 100. I think it's like 130 or something like that. So if you don't like using, I haven't shown you that yet, but we use GSPs, Groovy Server Pages, which is kind of like the Groovy templates you saw earlier. But if you prefer using Wit for your view layer, or Flex, or any Ajax toolkit, or this iPhone view layer, or if you want to use JMS for communication, or adding such capabilities to your Grails application, using JSecurity or Spring Security, you can choose the right plugin for your needs. And there are many plugins for your needs. And very recently, we created a specific Google App Engine plugin so that you are able to quickly create applications which are going to work on Google App Engine and provide some additional command line options for deploying your application, running your application locally with the local JT container, and so on. So here are the steps we're going to follow, and I'm going to show you just that. If I go back to my console there. So I'm going to create Grails create app. I'm going to create a new application, demo 2, because I created demo 1. Let's create a second demo. So I installed Grails on my machine in some place on my machine, and I just created a Grails home environment variable. I added Grails home bean in my path, and then I can use all the Grails commands. So I created an application, a blank application. So you see there the new directory that it created. So I can go to demo 2. I cd in the directory, and if you look at what's available, so I've got basically the structure you saw earlier with I can put my controllers, my domain classes there, services, taglibs, etc. So this is currently just an empty application, but you can already run it. So you don't have to configure anything to wire Spring and Hibernate. Out of the box, you've got a running application. So if I just run that application, running Grails application, so it takes a few seconds to start up on my machine. Okay, so if I go to demo 2 here, demo 2, it created a small empty Grails application. So you've got a welcome string, but screen, not string, but that's all you have right now. Okay, so I go back there. I'm stopping there. I'm going to, first of all, since we're not going to use a relational database, I'm going to uninstall the Hibernate plugin. Then I'm going to install the App Engine plugin. And it's going to ask me a little question in a second. Okay, so it's downloading, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to use JPA or JDO for persistence? So we don't use the low-level API, but we can use either JPA or JDO. So let's say JPA, why not? Okay, so I installed the App Engine plugin, and I'm going to create a domain class called book. Why not? So what the plugin does also, we've got some templates for generating things like the views, the controllers for the scaffolded views. And the plugin provides new command line options, but also provides some new templates for creating, for instance, the domain classes. So if you look at my book domain classes here, okay. So it created a book classes annotated with @entity Javax persistence, and you can see the ID there. Grails provides some nice constraints, so you can put some constraints on your fields. So a book, basically a book has got a title and we've got an author, okay? A very simple example. And now what I can do is Grails generate all, no, something I wanted to do, or otherwise it's not going to work. I have to use a package. So no, I'm going to mkd here, because otherwise App Engine doesn't like very much if you don't put your domain classes, your JPA annotated classes in the default package. So I always forget that step. So I have to follow that step myself. Domain, let's say demo package. I'm going to move my, so I should have done that right away. Sorry for that. Domain, demo, and I'm going to edit my book class again to add the package information. Should have done that first hand too. I don't need semicolons. Can even remove that. Okay, so I've got a package demo. If I didn't make a mistake, now I'm going to generate all book. And it's going to create some controller and some views for this book domain class using the templates, the new templates provided by the Google App Engine plugin for Grails. Okay. Oh, I made some mistakes, I guess. Interesting. No persistent provided. What's wrong there? I don't know. Sorry? Yes, looks like it's saved. Views, it didn't generate anything. What could be wrong there? I don't see anything. Well, never mind. I'll show you the one which is running. Must be something stupid. Okay, so back there. So basically I arrive at the exact same state there. So I open that again. So it should really be the same thing. I don't know why. So my book domain class is there. So that's exactly what I had written, if I'm not mistaken. Package demo. It created a controller here, the book controller. So we've got methods like index, list, show, delete, all the usual CRUD operations. And it's using the where is it? For instance, yeah, here you can see that we injected Spring's transaction template or JPA template, and then you can call the JPA template to execute some queries, etc., for doing all the CRUD operations. And here we've got the views, so it created create, GSP, edit, list, and so on. And you can see how, for instance, we've got tag libs for creating some nice tabular representation of all the instances of book. And if I run that locally, so the App Engine, so I forget about the commands, I never remember by heart. Okay, install plugin, App Engine run, that's App Engine run that I have to call. App Engine, so App Engine run command is added by the App Engine plugin. And if I run that, I'm then able to start my application. using the JDO enhancer class below the JPA implementation. And then in a couple of seconds, it's going to be running. Yes. Okay, I'm launching that. In the usual web welcome string, you can see the available controllers. So for instance, the book controller. And okay, it remembered some entries. Let's say Andres, Almirai, Griffin in action. And I can create new instances, and you can see there's a nice table, and you can see all the books and so on. So all the I can edit again if I made a typo or something. I can update, I can delete. So all the usual CRUD operations are there. And then, so I don't think I configured my App Engine XML properly. But if I had done so, I could just say Grails App Engine deploy on App Engine. So in just one single simple command, I can show you. So I don't want to try the connection just in case it doesn't work. So basically, some differences with some conventions that Grails usually follows. When you create a Grails application, it starts with a 1.0 version or something like, or 0.1, if I always forget. But on App Engine, you have to use integers, so you can say set version 1. Then you can package your application so that you can then use App Engine deploy to deploy on App Engine. So I'm not going to show you that because there's like 20 megabytes of jars, and it takes a while to download on the first download, on the first upload, sorry. But what's nice with App Engine is that with the command afterwards, when you make changes, it's just diffs that are sent through the wire, so it's quite nice. But trust me, you can use just that command line, and it's going to deploy on App Engine. Okay, so that was the demo. Yeah, just before doing the little summary, just to mention some little sample applications that are online, for instance. So I mentioned where is it? The web console that I created, Groovy console appspot.com, or just to show you another little example and why App Engine is quite neat. I made a small mashup of Google Maps, the Flickr API for retrieving pictures, and I also used the Google geocoding service, so that if I put some, let's say, the Eiffel Tower in Paris, if I do this, it's going to center the map on Paris. Takes a while, don't know why. And so it's, yeah, the Eiffel Tower is right there, and it's going to show you some pictures of the Eiffel Tower, and I saw some past searches from users. And just to show you what's also nice with Groovy itself, for instance, if you look at, so where is it? There. If you look at this small application, I'm going to show you the code. Basically, one of the nice things I like, particularly with Groovy, is for doing things like accessing some URLs. I define a URL, then I get the input stream on that URL. I can use the Groovy XML facilities for parsing XML, and although, well, you don't have to use the DOM API or anything, you can just say node.response.status.code, and it's going to fetch the right node in your XML. So in just very simple expressions like that, you can retrieve the coordinates. So this is the part where I'm using the geocoding service, because I want to retrieve the latitude and longitude of some special address. Then I also call Flickr with some keywords using in the address, so that I find pictures which are related to that point. And again, I'm using XML Slurper to retrieve from the response all the photos. Then I'm creating a list of photos, defining URLs of these photos. And then I'm using the markup builder to create the HTML view that you saw. So for instance, I'm using the Ajax APIs for loading Google Maps. Then I've got a small form, and I also use the entity, put stuff in the data store, and basically in just, almost 90 lines of code, you've got a small mashup of 3 different services. So it's pretty funny. Okay, so to sum up everything, so Groovy is also a first-class citizen on Google App Engine, so you can use Java, but you can use other languages like Groovy, for instance. There are many shortcuts notations which allow you, for instance, parsing XML in a pretty neat way, accessing the DOM and so on very easily. We provide servlets and templates for controllers and views. And when it's going to be officially released, the small Gaelic module will allow you to simplify even further the development of small applications with raw Groovy. But if you want to build some more complex applications, you'd obviously better use Grails because it really simplifies and streamlines the development of web applications. And thanks to the App Engine plugin, it's pretty easy to develop and deploy applications on the App Engine cloud. A few links. So you'll find them on the slides when you've got them. On the Spring Source blog, I wrote a small example, a small tutorial on developing Groovy web apps for App Engine. And my colleague, Guillaume Laforge, the lead of the Grails project, also created a nice screencast that shows something like the demo I showed earlier. So I invite you to look at that. And the App Engine plugin, that's where you can find it. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I think we've got just 3 minutes left for some questions and perhaps some answers. So please use the mic if you want to ask questions. And also don't forget to provide some feedback and go to havasec.com/io to provide feedback on the presentations, speakers, and so on. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
Can we run Groovy on top of the Dolphin virtual machine on Android?
So Groovy on Android?
Yeah.
So far, we can't. But we've got a Google Summer of Code student this year who's going to work on supporting Groovy in Android. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you may be able to develop Android apps on using Groovy as the language. Thank you.
I saw that you had mentioned the Google Web Toolkit.
Yeah.
So far, all the apps were developed here just using either just Groovy or Grails. Mm-hmm. Where does the Google Web Toolkit come in? And right now, the Google Web Toolkit only, as far as I know, accepts Java. So how can you use Groovy?
So so if you install the GWT, the GWT plugin, so instead of using GSPs like those templates that I showed you, actually you can use normal GWT, Java classes and so on for your view. And we've got some hooks so that you can call back to the Grail services, which are exposed as, RPC servlets for GWT. So you can interact, have your nice UI in GWT, and talk to a backend service built on Grails.
So there's no getting away from Java, though.
And obviously, the GWT part is developed with Java, not with Groovy.
Yeah, okay.
We'd need to develop a kind of special compiler which compiles Groovy into JavaScript, but we've not done that yet.
Okay, something to wish for. Thank you.
Any other question? One last. We've got 30 seconds. You've got 28 seconds.
Is there any plans for a plugin for Wave? Or the Wave, the robot part?
Not yet. It's a bit too soon, but that would be interesting, yes. Okay, thanks again for your attention.